And the moment it popped online and I saw it, I said, Kevin, take some pictures of that. Let me see the underside of it. What's it look like? Shortly after that, it died. I think I put the kabong on these clams. By the way, clams die. It's a fact, especially if they're pretty or interesting. So the mantle on this clam was different. But if I had to, place bets, I'd really have to say it was a maxima. And that apparently Tridacna maxima ranges from being like Crocea to being like Squamosa to being like Costata. So it has a range that just goes all over the place. Are there genes of Costata all the way across the Indian Ocean to Australia? Maybe, could be coincidence, but look at that shape. This is the Costata from West Africa. That's a side view of it. And mind you, this is a big clam. That's the one from Australia. Notice the number of ridges there. That's the underside of the one from Africa. And that's the one from Australia. They're very, very similar. So perhaps Costata even extends quite far into the Indian Ocean. We really don't know. It would take somebody to look carefully for it and knowing what they're looking for. And I don't know if we have the ability to test the genetics and really definitively say which clam what is. Look where rosewater eye is. There's the range of Costata-like clams, and look where rosewater eye is. Do you think there's a difference between rosewater eye and Costata? Maybe there is, maybe there isn't. This, the lower clamshell is the West Australian maxima that looked like a Costata, and the upper one is a Red Sea maxima clam. Look at the number of ridges on the shell. There is variation within maxima on the number of ridges, but that's quite a distinct difference there. Look at the top of the shell margins there. Now, Red Sea maximas are a very distinct morph, and they do have sharp teeth that like margins, but not that sharp. The very bluest, most beautiful mantles on maxima occur in the Red Sea. Okay, Tridacna tevaroa was a fairly recently described giant clam from Fiji, very far eastern Fiji and Tonga. It's also known as Tridacna, how do you pronounce that, Umbalavuana, which, James, is that really now the correct name, considering that it was described first as Umbalavuana? I don't know. They're sticking with tevaroa. Yeah, and I'm not positive on that, so I guess every time we mention it, we talk about the two names. The shell grows really quite big, and it's most similar looking to Duraso, which I'll be showing you in a few moments. And this is the only one that's really a deep water, exclusively a deep water clam. So it must have special adapted zooxanthellae. There's a lot of question as to what's the reason that it occurs there. Could it have been fished out in shallower water? That's a possibility. It seems that it's evolved to that there. And maybe, so far nobody has found it anywhere else. Maybe it is endemic there, or maybe someday we'll find it in the Philippines or some other region. That's it. Very, very small site. And this is what they look like, of course with a flash to see it. A very lumpy kind of a mantle. The edge of the mantle does not go over the shell, much like the genus Hippopus. You see those little bumps, tubercles? There's the incurrent siphon that has sort of blunt tentacles on it. And that's another view from the top. I think the bluish cast there is not the true color. I think that's just from the light at that depth. This is some shells. Notice on the underside there are some little red marks just like Hippopus and like the cockle clams, so it retains that feature. But the shells are overall very, very similar to Tridacna dorasa. There's another shot without a flash underwater. The largest giant clam is Tridacna gigas. Their shells can be well over 1 meter in length, and their range at present is quite a bit smaller than the original range because they've been overfished. There is some aquaculture of them for replenishing the natural stocks. Occasionally we do see them aquacultured, small ones available for the aquarium trade. And that is the distribution range, but it's not very common across that range. Typical appearance is kind of a mustard colored mantle with bright blue rings surrounding the little eyes, and then a dark border right at the edge of the mantle. But they can also be bright blue, almost black in color with blue dots. Okay, Tridacna dorasa is among the most common clam available for aquariums. Also extinct or uncommon over a large portion of its natural range, and it's the most commonly aquacultured giant clam. And you see on the bottom line I said may represent 2 species. That's not published. It's my opinion, and I'll just show you why I think that. And that's the distribution. Again from James, that's the typical shell, fairly symmetrical. Sometimes they become asymmetrical if they're boxed in by corals. They can even have a shape quite a bit like a Hippopus. There's the underside. You can see that the byssus opening varies. Sometimes there's an opening there, sometimes not. It can be quite closed. In any case, it's usually small. They're attached when they're juveniles, but as they grow larger, they remain unattached. They don't need to use the byssus filaments. That is the typical pattern that you would find on Tridacna dorasa. When we originally started getting the aquacultured clams from Palau, this is what they looked like. Sometimes Tridacna dorasa can have scutes, so you might be confused and think it looks a bit like squamosa. Yeah. Is it me? Does that look brighter to you? Is it from an angle that it's darker? It's dark. It's dark. Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, my pictures are much, much better than this. Yeah, fortunately. This is from Reef Builders. Jake, you showed some juveniles of Tridacna dorasa that had really big scutes on them. So they can have that, but they can also wear off. This is a beautiful blue Tridacna dorasa that Daniel Knob photographed in the Philippines. And that's one that was at ORA. This was the first Tridacna dorasa that I saw on my first trip to Australia. Bright, deep blue on the Great Barrier Reef. Yeah, isn't it ridiculous? And it was big. It was a full-size clam. Now, in the aquarium trade these days, we see a lot of dorasa that look like this, and you notice these spots here. If you look at them closely, they are windows. They're called hyaline organs. They're actually regions where there's no pigment, and it allows light through to the tubes where the zooxanthellae are living. And that's an organ. It's not just a color. And the regular dorasa doesn't have those. When I say regular, I mean one could be regular, the other's not. It's just relative. The ones that I saw first coming out of Palau don't have those. So there's a region where they have these. There's another view where you can see them. Now it could be, the difference between curly and straight hair. I mean, this could be just a feature, but I don't know. It seems to me that it might be enough to warrant it being a subspecies. Hippopus hippopus, the horsehoof or strawberry clams. Very rough, angular shell. I've shown you examples of that earlier with the Omanodacta fossil. The mantle does not extend over the shell margin, and there's no tentacles on the incurrent siphon. Here's the range, quite similar range to Tridacnocrocea. And that's a typical shell that's been cleaned up. Notice the red banding. And notice also here that distinctive structure on the shell there and here. Point that out again.